Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another glorious edition of Ask That. My name is Clark Sell, and today with me, I have a researcher, geek, nerd, designer by the name of Matthew Ing. Matthew, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Clark. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Now, you're coming at us from Austin, Texas, so it's a
Yep.
little bit warmer down there than my little coat I got going on here.
We were actually coming out of a cold snap. So,
Yeah,
but by
that's
that I
it.
know it was like 50 degrees and people were complaining. I was like, come on, people.
Yeah,
Honestly, we're
yeah,
weak now.
yes, use it. Enjoy it for the
Yeah,
moment.
exactly.
All right, before we dive into things, let's do a quick intro. Who are you? What you do? What keeps you
Yeah.
up at night?
I am a design researcher. I started off mostly on the visual side when we were doing mostly websites, responsive, and then I got an opportunity to go into a startup and start working in mobile, and that's where a lot of those lines started to blur.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, and my mentor, now friend, he's like, "Look, we need research," and it was this weird identity thing that I had to kind of put my head around. But what I found from that position into following positions is that once I understood more, like all of my work just improved.
Interesting.
And yeah, and so where here I am in IBM, it's almost like I took 10 steps back when I came in here. It's trying to recreate that culture again. It's like we need to understand more before we start making these decisions. In a
Interesting.
lot of cases, $1 million decisions. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. So let's just start at the basics. I mean, I think people when they hear research, we think of kind of like the big IBM, Microsoft spend billions of dollars on research and come up with fancy dog robots that open doors. Like
Yeah.
which are creepy, by the way.
Very
What
weird.
what what does research really mean?
hmm I think the best description, I wish I knew who said it, was what we're doing is taking scientific methods that they've used, dogs who open up
Yeah,
doors,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, so where we can get knowledge, let's say through qualitative user interviews, someone who we think we're trying to go after, right?
Okay.
And we're consistent in that process and how we grab it, how we evaluate it, and then how we get to a conclusion, or let's say where we think the next steps and directions we need to go in. And that's where what we mean by research and how we try to incorporate that in a product design and development life cycle.
So that's interesting because as you were saying that, I my product management roots kind of came into play there, and I started thinking about the iteration negative zero of working with the business and people to figure out what does this really mean to have a good product, um, versus kind of the other side of research, which is that like very theoretical. I don't know, how do we do something totally creative that we've never done before?
hmm hmm
Is there a marry between those two, or are we talking two kind of separate ideologies
Yeah,
of research?
I the person that wants to incorporate all of these things says there's probably some way where you can bring these all together. What I've seen so far and how people are practicing this on one side, like how do we try something completely new? How do we target a new industry versus like on our side, how do we make sure we're answering the right questions for who we think our users are? Um, a lot of times the contentions I've found in all of my positions from small startups to larger corporations is that someone has done what they think is research, but they think it's something different. So let's say on our product manager side, they're looking at it from a business sense, and they're looking at it as where are we leaving money on the table, right? What
Yeah,
data are they looking at? And then from our side, of course, like what questions aren't we asking, basically, right? What are we overlooking?
sure.
And so I've trying to work on where that marries, but a lot of it is basically getting that information to the people that are making things. And let's say finding a point where we validate that through early testing and then getting it out in the wild and watching it. But at the same time, like talking to and looking at areas that we tend to shun or ignore. And I'm going to bring up marketing, right? Because it's like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the dirty word
yeah,
within product design. And
yeah.
I just had a few enlightening conversations with our marketing team. And it's like, I think they said of like, we have And I was like, we haven't talked to anyone on your side.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're trying to create a path that is contrary to the path we believe we need, right? So
yep.
it's like, okay. And then all those questions come up around that.
So
Yeah.
let's make it a bit concrete then. So
Mm-hmm.
you're working on putting together a research team or forming that kind of as a culture. What does that look like from a team organization dynamic layout?
Mm-hmm.
What's the kind of quick organizational chart, if you will?
Quick org chart. We have fairly new to industry researchers who are coming in, maybe 1, 2 years experience, um, probably from an interaction background, interaction design or
Sure.
UX, if you will. And we get them as quick as possible embedded into a part of the product where they can become a domain expert.
Okay.
And then we have people with more experience, more senior leads, where they're up above looking at, let's say, an entire platform, the system, right? What are the different, if you will, tribes, or and essentially they become silos.
Sure.
What are they looking at, and then what boundaries are they basically breaking in some places?
Okay.
One of the key things that we deal with as a larger platform is like this is so unsexy, but accounts and billing. Right?
Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, you said
Yeah,
it, brother.
somebody does something to make it
Yeah.
easier, let's say, in their minds for an account or
Yeah.
complex account, if you will. And then what does that do downstream around billing, for
Yeah.
example, and then the users you need to manage?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah. Completely unsexy, but yet
yeah.
if you can't take money from somebody, you have no
Right.
product at the end of the day.
Business.
Right.
Right.
And then you have no role in the company itself. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do your researchers
Mhm.
do they consider themselves part of the product team? Because there's a bit of a semantics there that's I think pretty important.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to get our message more clear or clearer about is where do researchers fit within, if you, I guess we all kind of seen the analogy of three-legged stool or
Yep.
the
Yep.
partners of it, developers,
Sure.
designers. A lot of experiences we've had in the past of trying to basically get people to believe us as experts is like if we were too closely aligned with design, um, the opinions and the contention sort of rise between development, product
Yep.
management, and design.
Yep.
And so our goal basically this year, it's like, how can we separate ourselves just a little bit
Sure.
in a way to make sure everyone feels supported. It's an interesting cultural shift and sort of beliefs come out and then, the fun arguments
Yeah.
on how it's supposed to work. So,
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's played product manager for a number of years, it was
mhm,
always a contention of whether or not you're really part of engineering, yet the business, yet marketing. Like, what role do you really play? You don't know what you're talking about. Like, you go on and on about
mhm,
whatever, but it was always you can't get rid of the work. Like, the
yeah,
work still needs to happen,
hmm,
and yet how you choose to invest in it or what you call it,
right,
who cares really?
right.
So, so research then, I mean, how far into the product does it go? I mean, are we
Hmm,
talking just kind of the user interaction,
hmm,
visual type stuff?
hmm,
Or, I mean, obviously, but do you get into things like the back end and
hmm,
like how do
hmm,
you be more efficient? I mean, we mentioned accounts and billing
yeah,
earlier, but
yeah,
from a technology standpoint, hey,
hmm,
if we completely switch to, I don't know, JavaScript,
right,
would that does the spread operator like give us all this
right.
greatness?
Right. One thing, the line we're trying to kind of keep is like, of course, not telling them how to solve that problem, but
Mm-hmm.
it does help with the new researchers. They are sort of focused on how maybe a potential user at a certain level understands the data that we're giving them or how they search for it and find it and use it.
Sure.
When we get into the accounts part and billing, that's when we're getting up to the higher levels of, let's say, a user and how that person needs to see a system.
Yep.
Then we need someone that kind of understands the system a bit more, and that's where the more senior people come in. Without giving away too much information, it's like one of our customers complained about um, trying to create something that looks at different accounts. Like they have multiple accounts,
Sure.
they have a
Yeah.
lot of money running through them, and it's like I needed someone from account, at least someone that understood accounts on how our current system works. If we can create a way that they can do that without asking us to re-architecture
Yeah,
everything,
right,
you
exactly.
know, like,
Yep.
right. So there's this, you know, it's again, something that for people that are listening, once you get into a place where you have basically big customers with big pants and either they give you their money or they don't, they're these sort of requests you have to kind of figure out how to navigate.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Where does the research team like I'll say where do they solicit their requirements from? Obviously the end customer is always an important place, but do they get into places like support and the support
hmm
channel and maybe
hmm
the thing that's garbage that's been created?
Right. Right. We do. What we've spent a lot more time with in the beginning of the year was talking to our product managers and what's on their scope or what's on their radar. And
Sure.
so the first couple quarters are like, this thing is super hot and I need kind of eyes on this. And that tends to be, hopefully we've already been looking at it and we have screens out and they're already talking to development and working on that. And so we're at an evaluative process. We're showing people things. We're sort of testing things where we think it's going to trip somebody up.
Yeah.
This is almost like this is weird, but we're also doing a little sort of research with them where we kind of
Yep.
nudge that conversation. It's like, hey, have you heard about this initiative? Or we've recently merged a company. Like,
Sure.
what does it mean to you? And they're like, oh
Sure.
yeah, God, there's this whole thing that I don't even know what to think about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that is something that we kind of collect from each of the product managers. And then we bubble that up to, let's say, the UX manager of the platform or the the lead architects and all that stuff. And like, this is this thing that we have to keep an eye on and
Sure.
sort of whisper that to people as far as the requirements. Because if we the active part of it,
Yep.
proactive, we came in and when we started, we had to be very reactive of basically what fires are coming out right now or what
Yeah.
has already been decided and sort
Sure.
of guiding where we can, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fine line between
mhm,
creativity and design and reality versus theory. And, at the end of the day, you've got to, if you're not shipping, you're not actually providing any value. And
yeah.
so, how do you guys balance those
hmm
pendulums?
hmm hmm Um, creativity. I'm trying to think if I got the question right. You're trying to understand the creativity and the balance of
Yeah,
business. Yeah.
yeah, your business needs and just, the reality is the product works a certain way. Maybe the
Yeah.
business sector works a certain way. You may not
hmm
like it or not, but yet
hmm
you want to, it'd be great to have all this other stuff. And, the
Right.
research says we should get there, but do we really need to get there today?
hmm
The product doesn't
hmm
even work that way without investing, millions of dollars to kind of bend it to work that way.
Right, right, exactly. I think when I was still a designer and even in this company, it was spending that time and giving the designers that were on my team a little more freedom to like in this free time, like this is part of our goal to see like we're not necessarily your day-to-day work, but like
Sure.
what can this thing do? Or what can you learn about the industry to just give you those ideas? And that's been super helpful, just giving them space to learn, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Because something my mentor has told me, it's like, it's just software and you can't do it day to day, although, you're going to blow up, right? But you
Yep.
still want to learn about something. And then that gives a lot of the open creativity part of it. One thing I've also been talking to them about, we do at least some study sessions on like just understanding like how does this business actually work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of balance them in that way of like, people always wonder, well, how do they make money? Like this is possibly what that business model is. And so we're
Yeah.
a little more playing field with our product managers on what they're trying to do. And then in the end, it kind of bubbles, or comes
Rolls.
down to your
Yeah.
day-to-day work. It's like, my ultimate goal for the researchers, but then hopefully to influence the designers in a way, when you're doing your project, like what is that thing you're trying to measure? Can you put a number to it?
Yeah.
Right? Is there something that you can say that is a success if it accomplishes this? So,
Yeah, that dovetails actually really close to my next question is what does
mhm,
the output of research look like and how do you
mhm,
know if it is in fact successful?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of the need for this team that came in was everyone was asking, why are we doing this? Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Why are we doing this initiative? And to help them with that clarity. So, on both sides, if design and even product management to some extent and developers don't understand that why, we went into a lot of initiatives pretty vague, and then
hmm
hence a lot of confusion and contention, right? So if we can get everyone to start speaking in that language, like this is the problem, right? This is the
yep.
thing we're trying to solve in a concrete, hopefully number, money, user, customer acquisition, if you will, sense, then that's something we can all focus on throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I actually appreciate the fact you said this is the problem. I think that
Mhm.
it's a very grounded way of looking at like we are here to provide a service or a thing that solves someone's problem, down the road. So how what was the impetus of actually even starting uh, needing a research team? I mean,
Right.
where was the champion that was like, yeah, here I'll plunk down $500,000 a year
Oh
for
my gosh, yeah.
somebody to even do this?
Right. I would give the credit to my mentor friend, and he's been like a UX director and creative director in past roles and other jobs. Matthew Cunningham. I think
hmm
that's I could plug him, right?
Yeah,
Right?
totally. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
plug anybody we want.
exactly. So we've had. I'll back that up a little bit. Like I've done smaller research projects when I was an interaction design lead for,
Okay.
part of the platform. And it was effective up until the point where I was limited in basically the data I had access to and customers I can actually get within a certain timeline. And
Sure.
so we had one-off research projects that were kind of limited in their effect. And he came to me a number of times. He's like, I really need a research team. And I was like, okay, right.
Right.
What does that mean? So we
Right.
spent a couple of cycles trying to figure out what that team does and what it's trying to fill, because the big need was they were getting requirements from name your person,
Yep.
right?
Sure.
And he was trying to slow down that push to get things out as quickly as possible
hmm
to give his designers like the focus and sort of vision for what they're supposed to be going after. And he
Sure.
couldn't do it just as designers. And so he, of course, pitched his management, his VPs. It's like, and we got a lot of support from them. But through Matthew Cunningham's sort of leadership, just like, I need this team. And
Yeah.
that's what kind of gave us that impetus. We've had so many like immediate turnarounds. It was just so unsustainable for a
Sure.
team, for a product, and ultimately for the company. So,
So obviously hindsight's always 2020. Do you have a sense of the cost of not having a design team? I mean, you mentioned maybe the products you get kind of caught into the grind of need another thing faster and
yeah.
faster, but there had to
hmm
be some point where it's like, look, we're going down a rat hole. If
hmm
we don't do this, I mean, and I could paint extremes. If we don't do this, we're going to
Right.
lose in the market. We're not going to get this. We're not going to innovate on our thing. But those are all like intangible things.
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. What is that? So the cost of not having a research team. So I'll start with the immediate cost. Like we brought on, it was one lead and another research lead, Diana Hubbard. I'll plug another person.
God
She
bless.
has a ton of experience with research and on infrastructure and paths, right? Um, that was something that we had to field every time. Why do you have two leads dedicated to this? And so
No, yeah,
what we had to immediately prove was that product managers in design at first, like, we're not doing the one-offs, we're not doing the constant MVPs that
yeah.
we felt we were getting from, let's say, whoever is asking for this stuff. Um, it's still kind of early to tell if I can give you a number. I don't think I can,
No,
but one of
I just meant kind of cost overall, not like, hey, we're going to lose
yeah,
$1 million, but you
right.
know,
One of the things that we've been tracking is that since we're playing a lot of the catch-up game in the market, we feel like we're
sure,
up against other companies like AWS and Microsoft Azure. The temptation is to like build up to parity, and
yeah,
then as
yeah,
you keep tacking up stuff, we tend to ignore a lot of like things that have been like just burning bugs, if
yep,
you will. or inefficiencies. And so that's where we come in and have, let's say, regular customer sessions. We're watching analytics. Where are things dropping off? Where are people having problems? And then we can like surface that to people like, please make these a priority. These are coming up in all of our sessions that 3 or 4 releases ago, it wasn't a problem. Like you mentioned before, tickets, like, but now it's coming up in our face-to-face interviews with our customers, and it's also showing up a lot in our support. So,
yeah. As a product manager, you used to always say, you kind of skate to the puck, and if you want to, you can't necessarily build the product that the user's asking for, because what they're really telling you is that your product has a set of deficiencies, and yet you're just solving what really is a support problem. It may be a great feature, but it was something that should have already been there. Chances are it should have already been there. And so what's the thing you really should be building? And how does that solve their problem yet better in those cases? And that's a hard, hey, but Joe customer says they need this thing. And if I just had this thing, it's like, well, then Joe wouldn't call you. He'd call you about something else. Like,
exactly.
So he's already calling. He's going to keep calling. Change your phone number. So, all right. So let's kind of take it to I'll say the normal man, right? So, IBM has pockets. They can afford to take an investment to have a research team, whatnot. I don't think that research I think everybody has to do research, and there are some costs to not doing it, regardless of the size of the company, the thing that you're doing. Some amount of research has to be done. There is some amount of talking to your customers or your idea and doing some design. How does the smaller shop start to incorporate this as a thing in their day-to-day life cycle?
It should come from leadership somewhere, right? And where I've seen it when I was working in smaller agencies and in the startup, the UX manager, the lead, let's say UX designer, for both of those companies I was at, like pitched that and championed that for each project. At the startup, it was championing that for the culture, right? It's like I'll plug it up, Peter Sandberg. Great guy. He painted the picture of where everyone was asking for these things for this mobile app, right? And he's like, and he showed them like where they conflict, right? And it's like, this is where I need help. And he kept sort of pushing that message to where we eventually like at least got time within our cycles as designers to go out and start talking to people. Like one of the big questions we had, it was for a mobile payment app for people that were underbanked, if you will, right? So really great project and something that we needed to figure out. It's like, one, what was the trust level of dealing with money on your phone, right? And then 2, what kind of phones do you have, right? And so a lot of the decisions in your previous questions, like how much do we affect like development and architecture? It's like a lot of it goes back to like what device is this thing going to happen on, right? And then I think the third thing, for example, in that case was like what were we dealing with? Dodd-Frank. So what sort of regulations does this thing have to handle on a mobile phone for possibly like low-end Android devices, right? So, and that, once we got that to them, it helped frame sort of what people were trying to go after and then put in those guardrails of like what we could actually do, right?
No, keep going.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, so for the smaller shops and agencies, the UX director there, Leah James, every customer in all of her conversations when we did our kickoff was like, this is what the time we need to know what exactly is coming out of this. What do you hope to get out of this? And so that both of those have influenced me on more or less champion that for my researchers on my team. So
how does the international culture and landscape affect the research? Because I have to imagine that is a pillar in and itself of everything that's being done. Because, I mean, let's be honest, like you can build an app and shove it out to the world. You can throw a website up and shove it to the world. So to not take the world into account seems, I mean, I guess from a banking situation, sure, that's an obvious one. But it has to be a pillar
Hmm.
to research. So how is that kind of considered in everything you guys are
Yeah,
doing?
we're just getting to that, and one thing that we've noticed now is, of course, through tickets, and then
So Joe's
right.
calling again.
Joe's calling again, but this time
Yeah,
he's calling from Japan,
yeah,
and then he's like,
right. He's got a
and
new
so
market.
right, from a recent release, we've noticed something, for example, on in the Asia side of like, um, I'll just take one thing of like latency, right?
Hmm.
We've released something now
Yep.
that's affecting the Asian side, and we haven't supported that, for example, in the data centers in there. It's not a real thing, but it's just an example that what
Yep.
I've seen, or just what's come out. And so, like, bubbling that up, bringing that in our reviews, is like, this is what we're seeing so far in tickets. Our next step would be to try to bring in those customers if we can, or at least their proxy, like a representative from our side, like what they've been hearing, and then get
Yeah.
closer to what they're actually experiencing. Because there are some things that a lot of times designers on our side, like, one is like how things are shipped, how are they supported, but also from the design side, how are we trying to accompany language in general,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
We've made certain things. This kind of explodes a lot of our designers' minds that, like, yes, let's make sure we're mobile friendly in certain areas, for those key experiences. But then you got to think about how that word looks in Germany.
Right.
Right?
Right. Right. And your pixels are out the window.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Like someone has a 25 word
That's right.
their word.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I used to do a lot of mobile stuff back in the day, and I can remember seeing, I was at some event, and I forget the company's name, but they were just about to launch their app, and they were super, super excited. And he's showing me the whole thing, and he's using it and whatnot. And I always got really good. My wife is left-handed, and I always got very accustomed to picking up any phone and any experience and going, how would this look on for somebody who's left-handed? And so they're showing me this whole app, and they're just super excited about it. And I pick it up in my left hand. And I said, it's great, looks great. It will never work for a person with their left hand. And they had built this whole experience around this like radial dial that was really easy to use if the phone was in your right hand. I said, can you swap? Can you just mirror the UI? And they were like, no. like, like, well, yeah, it doesn't really work well for a left-handed person. The chances are they're going to have it in their other
Right.
hand.
You're gonna have someone who's left-handed, right?
Right, right. And
Yeah.
it was just
Yeah.
like, boom, oh, whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah, we missed that one. So, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Oh, and it's so
Germany.
many of that. There's so many cases, public and not. That's a good one. I think there's a recent debacle around facial recognition,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Very public ones around Google, for example.
yeah.
Like how does this deal with people who have, like,
Yep,
different color skin, right?
yep,
Right?
yeah,
That kind of
yep,
thing. Just think about that. Plan for
yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, before my last question, I want to just take an opportunity and extend a thank you for you taking the time out today to be on this, to share what you share. I know that you do a lot of speaking and mentoring. You spoke on TEDx. I think that design space and breaking that down, even in the research space, the work that you're doing there to share that with the world is fantastic. So, on behalf
Thank
of
you.
me and anybody else who's listening, thank you. And with that, my last question is really how does somebody learn more if this is something that they want to incorporate into themselves, into their
Mhm.
cultures? How do they? What would be your advice for them to kind of embrace this and go do?
Yeah, let's say the just beginner just wants to get started and look at things. And I wouldn't stop there, but just enough research came out and just sort of opened the door to what we could do, right? And
Okay.
then what people can do in the beginning. And I think a lot of people know that. Is it a blog apart, or list apart, or at least the
Yeah,
series of,
list
right?
apart.
They have a lot of good articles on just the thinking around it.
Okay.
If you then get to the, I'd say I want to do more. There's a bunch of books that require some study and mentor and all that stuff, but it's like, I think it's called The Craft of Research.
Okay.
I'll find a link for you, and I'll
Yeah,
send
we'll
it to
put
you.
it in there.
Yeah, and that kind of gets to some of the fundamentals of kind of looking around basically your question, right? What is the
Yeah.
thing you're trying to go after? And then how do you kind of work through that? And it's helped me take a few steps back into like, what is that request? What is that problem? What is this noise? And then really explore what is actually happening and get to a more focused, let's say, research plan or approach to understanding that problem.
Sure. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. I like I said, I'm a big believer in it. I think it's something that whether you acknowledge it or not, you're going to have to do it. There's a cost for either doing it up front or not doing it at all. Just like design,
Yeah.
right? You can choose to not do it, or you can choose not to do architecture, but at some point, you're gonna have
You'll
to do
figure
it.
it out.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
So, a little homework up front might pay dividends down the road.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, Matthew, with that, thank you for all of the hard work and everything that you shared. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody that's listening. Give us a thumbs up, like us. I will put all of Matthew's information down below. Check him out. Follow him, like him.
Yeah. I'm on Twitter a lot. You could message me and so on. So yeah, I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah. Okay.